Well, thank you so much for your time. It's really an honor to speak to you.
It's nice to speak to you too.
I've got your one book here, the Revelation commentary.
Uh-huh. It's one of three.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a bit of investigating on eschatology. In particular, I've been investigating a lot of the futurist views on the book. I'd just like to ask you some questions. Okay.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me get my list of questions. Well, first of all, Chris, I'd like to ask maybe your interpretation on this. Do you think the book of Revelation is a book about the future, in particular the end times, or is it a book about the first century John addressing issues at the time that he was writing?
In true compromise fashion, I would say it's both. It's both about the first century and about, as you call it, the end times. The book of Revelation is both about the first century and it's about the hope for the future, rather than the end times, which I think is a problematic term. So yes, it is about the first century, in that all those writers writing in the first century believed that the hope for the future, which was looked forward to, was already in the process of fulfillment.
Would you say the book of Revelation specifically talks about the second coming of Jesus Christ?
Insofar as the belief that Jesus was the Messiah was absolutely central to all those first Christians, he must have had a part to play. But I think this is one aspect of early Christian hope that I think is distinctive. And the early Christians believed that that wasn't the end, that Jesus was raised from the dead, and to use Paul's expression, he had become the first fruits of the harvest of the dead. So there was a kind of interim period waiting for the fulfillment of that hope when the kingdom of God came on earth, and Jesus would return to be part of that. So the second coming is an integral part of early Christian expectation, which is focused on Jesus. And because the hope for the future new age was not just about the future, but was already in the process of fulfillment, they believed that Jesus was going to be part of that when it came in its fullness.
Do you think the Bible overall, in some of the apocalyptic books, gives details of what the second coming of Christ would look like? I know we probably can't say when it would come, but what kind of event it would be?
I don't think there's any book in the Bible which does that in the kind of detail that you get in a lot of modern commentaries, say on the book of Revelation, which links Revelation with Daniel and indeed with other prophetic texts to work out a detailed plan. Well, there is no detailed plan apart from the basic framework, which you've got both in Daniel and in Revelation, that there would be a time of tribulation on earth preceding the Messianic age. That basic pattern they adhered to, but apart from that, and one might say that there was a conviction that a certain number of tribulations and woes had to be gone through before the end could finally come. I don't think there's anything more specific than that. But, so the sort you get in Schofield Reference Bible, where different prophetic texts, stroke apocalyptic texts, are put together in a sort of map of the end of the world, I think that is foreign to what we've got in the Bible.
So there is no way to sort of calculate a chronological order in a way. Is that right?
I believe that to be the case, certainly as far as the biblical texts are concerned. In the history of the interpretation of the Book of Revelation, that kind of thing has happened a great deal. But it's based on the ingenuity of the interpreter rather than actually jumping at you out of the text.
Mm. I suppose to ask a very blunt question, it would be true to say that there is such a thing as the second coming.
It all depends what you mean by it. I mean, I can think of interpreters of the second coming who see that as the universal presence of Christ in humanity. So that's definitely not a literal interpretation. But I think, insofar as one considers the New Testament texts, I think that New Testament writers who mention it certainly have the view that Christ is going to appear from heaven and resume his role within the kingdom of God, and that will be seen by all flesh. And he may well reign in heaven now, but that's not where he's going to reign. So it's going to be heaven on earth.
Mm. Can I ask also, Chris, how are we to understand chapter 21 and 22 of a new heaven and a new earth? Mm-hmm. Do you think Christ will do a lot of work here before a new creation?
Good question. I think the hints that we've got in the book of Revelation about judgment on the destroyers of the earth suggest that the earth is going to be in a rather parlous position, to put it mildly, and will need some restoration. And just one thing in parenthesis here, one of the unusual things about the book of Revelation as compared with contemporary Jewish texts, with the exception of for Ezra, is that there is a messianic period which is limited, followed by the new heaven and the new earth. There's a bit of me wants to say that, well, perhaps the explanation for that is that John's apocalyptic imagination put together different sorts of things in the sort of way that we have them in chapters 20 and 21 and 22 in Revelation, and there's no particular significance about it for the visionary. But it may well be that, as you put it, Christ has to do a lot of work actually to get things right. Although the depiction in Revelation 21 is of the need to replace what is the case here by what God always intended for the good of humanity.
Yeah. The questions here. Yeah, so I'm just sort of interested in that different interpretations of the second coming, because I suppose growing up I heard so much of Christ will return again, but I'm just wondering, it does seem to be sort of perhaps not as simple as that. Would that make sense? There does seem to be a bit of a topic that needs looking into. It doesn't seem to be clear cut. Would that be correct in saying that?
I think thinking of the second coming of Christ solely in terms of him coming from heaven misses the point of that total hope for the future. His coming from heaven is in order to see a fulfillment or completion of that which was begun in his ministry in Galilee and Jerusalem. There he is quite clearly depicted as the agent of the coming kingdom, and that's been rudely interrupted by the actions of his opponents and his ultimately his death. but is going to be completed in the future, and when he will reign, or to use Paul's language in 1 Corinthians 15, he will reign until he has put all things under subjection to himself. So yes, that is kind of setting things right where things had gone wrong, thanks to the abuse of the creation by the principalities and powers.
Mm. Is it also? I'm just wondering, Chris. Sorry, I'm asking. I'm asking more questions that wasn't on the list. In Acts chapter 1, about the angel says you will see him come back as he left on the Mount of Olives. Would that be a literal, physical description of the second coming on the Mount of Olives?
I think in the context of Luke and Acts, probably that may be the case. I suspect that it is even more vague than that in Acts 1, however. That I doubt very much that the location of Christ's coming is going to have anything to do with Jerusalem. I really do not believe it.
Yes, I've also discovered in my investigation that a lot of people say that Israel has some big part to play in this chronological end time sequence, but that probably doesn't seem to be the case, does it?
I don't think it is. I don't think you can get that from the New Testament. In order to read that into Revelation, I'll come back to Revelation 7 in a minute. I think you've got to use lots of texts from the Old Testament in order to give the Jewish people some kind of eschatological role. I think Revelation 7 seems to suggest that Jews, as people of other races and beliefs, will actually have a part to play in that new age. But there's nothing particularly special about Jerusalem, other than there's going to be a new heaven and earth, the new Jerusalem descending from heaven. It's not the old Jerusalem at all in Revelation 21. It's the new Jerusalem coming from God. And in that new Jerusalem, the distinctive thing about it is there is no temple. That kind of hope for the future, which we find in Revelation, is independent of what we find within other hopes of other world faiths.
Mm. Yes, I also discovered from other scholars that there is no such thing as separating Jews and Gentiles in the New Testament, and certainly at the reason to separate Jews.
I mean that's absolutely key to Paul's understanding of what it's going to be like in the New Age. The Gentiles have a part to play, and I mean that of course is picking up on ideas within Old Testament prophetic texts as well, that this is not just for one nation but for all nations.
Yeah. I suppose in regards to how we live our lives here in the present, is there any sort of expectation we could have of what the future would be like, or do you think Christ really expects us to live by faith and that no one knows that day or hour? Would there be any kind of expectations?
Insofar as I can make sense of what's going on in the Pauline letters, what Paul seems to be doing there is to encourage people to live now in such a way that people can discern what it might be like in the future new age. And so the quality of life is itself a kind of witness and a foretaste of that which is to come. It's not the case that he suggests that one knows exactly what it's going to be like, and it's a kind of a process of experimentation within the context in which one is living, to reflect that which might be the case in the coming kingdom of God. And if the church means anything at all, it is a group of people who are meeting together, not just as followers of Jesus, but as people who exemplify here and now, or seek to exemplify here and now, what it's going to be like in the Messianic age.
I've heard many times from a lot of people that we are in the end times right now, and I suppose we've heard that a lot over the years. And would you say it would be a fair comment to say that from what we understand so far?
I don't think I would say that any of us can say that about any period. What I think we ought to be saying it about any period in which we live. We don't know, and this may well be the situation in which everything falls apart preceding the Messianic age. One can see good reasons why that might be the case in terms of the destruction of the earth, which is manifesting in the problems of climate change and the threats to the environment, which, let's face it, are going to be a catastrophic effect on the normal life in which we are living. And it's therefore incumbent upon those of us who take seriously the desire to want to live in a better sort of world, to mobilize ourselves and what it is we stand for and how it is we live, to reflect that which is to come. And that seems to me to be the heart of what it means to follow Jesus.
Yeah. Chris, in Acts chapter 2, when Peter gives his sermon to the crowd and he quotes Joel, that talk about the end days or end times. I just got wondering that the fact that Peter mentioned that 2,000 years ago, would that also seem to indicate, like you've just said, that it would be impossible to pinpoint on the end times on any age in the world?
Yeah, but what is crucial about that passage, which Paul picks up as well, is that the coming of the Spirit is a sign of the new age. So it is a vindication of the message of Jesus that the kingdom of God has drawn near, and that is exemplified in the way in which God's Spirit is at work in the world now. So God's Spirit, according to Joel, is poured out on all flesh, not just on the members of the Christian church, but is at work now. And it's up to all of us, whether we're inside or outside the church, to seek to discern what it is that God is calling us to do in terms of our common life and the responsibilities to each other, both nationally and internationally.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Chris. I think I've really got through all my questions, and yeah, this has been really fascinating. I suppose I'm just interested. The things I always assumed that were clear cut and crystal clear, it doesn't seem to be the case, I think.
I don't think so. I mean, I come back to the Schofield Reference Bible, which is extremely ingenious, but I mean that is absolutely typical of how it is. That detailed biblical exegesis, which includes the whole Bible, can be put together in such a way that you kind of get an ordnance survey map of how the end of the world is going to come. And I personally, I can't find that in the Bible as it stands.
Hmm. Do you think people's views will change as the years go on, or do you think this chronological end time sequence will just keep going?
I think it will depend. I can't believe that it will fade away. It is a symptom of the what's the word I want? Not supremacy, but the enormous influence of a certain form of evangelicalism has in, particularly in North America, but also growingly in this country, that it has more purchase in terms of its influence than it might have had 20 or 30 years ago. And that might continue to be the case if our condition in the world actually continues to deteriorate because of climate change.
Mhm. Is it true a lot of end time believers who follow the sequence of events may live in fear, perhaps, of the world? Uh,
I don't know which is the greater fear, whether they live in fear of that or having come under the influence of that, are in fear of their leaders to have to believe that.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Chris. This has been wonderful, an honor. I thank you so much for your time as well.
Nice to be in touch, nice to meet you, and nice to see you face to face.
You too, and I hope you stay safe and stay
Okay,
well during this time.
you too. All
Do
the
you
best.
live? You in England? Is that right?
I am in Cambridge now. The last 25 years I was in Oxford, and I returned to Cambridge, where I was at university and worked here before I moved to Oxford, and moved back because family-wise we've got many friends here.
Right. Yes, I studied theology in Cardiff University about 10 years ago.
Right. Oh, so do you come across Stephen Patterson?
Yeah, yeah. Simon Woodman was my teacher.
Okay. Yeah.
I interviewed Ian Boxall a couple of weeks ago as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. He's a former student of mine, and I've
Oh,
learned from him.
yeah, he was a lovely, lovely guy. He's in Washington, D.C. at the moment.
That's right. He is. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank
Okay.
you so much, Chris.
All the best.
God bless. Bye.
Bye.